And I find that that kind of relationship is extremely reactionary. It goes according to the bourgeois notion of justice. You know, justice is blind, but justice holds a scale. And the scale has to balance. Well, I don't know how you can balance the fact that I would be like a turtle on its back if I were knocked down by someone who's 12 years old. How can you balance that out? You can't. It must be assumed that from a physical point of view, I am not the equal of a 12-year-old child or a 15-year-old adolescent or an 18-year-old youth. Money assumes that we are all equal. We're holding a balance, you know? $10 worth of cash, gold, whatever you like, or whatever the money is supposed to be representative of, for 10 hours of labor. Well, there's some people who can't labor for 10 hours in one day, and who have very significant needs. And if money were to be the way in which we related to each other economically, the assumption would be that I cannot get what I need because I am not equal to someone else. In other words, money would be a way of decompensating the fact that I need more than somebody else, say, who is younger, who is healthier, who is more physically capable, more intellectually capable than I am. So it's not a relationship of complementarity, it's a deal. Money is the facilitator of making deals. Deals based on the idea that everybody is supposed to be equal in theory, whereas in fact they are unequal in fact. Now, I don't find it at all demeaning for me to say that I'm not your equal at 73 years of age. Afflicted by arthritis, afflicted by diabetes, and I don't want to go into the rest of my whole clinical record. But obviously, I would need your help, for example, if I had to get out of this chair. All right? So are we equal? No, we're not. Are we going to establish an exchange relationship based on $10 worth of this for $10 worth of that? Okay? Which currency, and I love the word currency, makes possible. Money. And once we do that and bring a money relationship between people, even as a means of distribution, even as a means of sorting out the way in which material things should be distributed. When in point of fact, we have a very simple practical relationship of usufruct. Whoever needs something should get them according to their needs, if it's possible to meet their needs. That's an entirely different moral equation, or an entirely different moral relationship. It's not even an equation. It's based on from each according to his or her ability, to each according to his or her needs. That's it. Money does not work with that assumption. Money works with the assumption that you have to have so much gold expressed in the form of paper currency, or silver expressed of paper currency, in order to get what you need. And if you don't have it, you don't get it. That is an amoral relationship, and money is the expression of that amoral relationship. It's not simply a means of distributing goods. It's not simply a means of exchanging goods. Money is something much more morally reprehensible. Namely, the idea that everybody, mythically speaking, fictively speaking, is equal, you see, and therefore should accordingly buy, not according to his or her needs, but his or her resources. But we don't all have the same resources, even in our own physical makeup. In our own physical makeup, we don't have the same resources at different stages in life, not to speak of different kinds of people who are also in different stages of life.
Someone might respond that without a system of reward, how are you going to inspire people to go to the factory?
Well, you have a lot of problems raised over there. First of all, are we going to have factories? What kind of factories are we going to have? Will people have to go to them? For example, we are now moving toward so-called factories that are almost entirely, produced almost entirely by machines. And the kind of work that is done in factories more closely approximates maintenance of these machines, oiling them here, replacing a part there, tightening a screw here, whatever you like, than actually on an assembly line, you know what I mean, hammering away and chiseling away and so on and so on and so forth, welding and whatever you like. Welding is now being done in most automobile production by automated devices. And anyone who's seen the inside of a modern automobile plant finds that there are relatively few workers now. So we have to really examine every word that we use: factory, who will be in the factory, how much machinery will be used, and so forth. Secondly, in a cooperative society, one of the most important elements of cooperation is that everybody should do their bit. And part of the education of young people would be to develop that spirit of cooperation in which doing your bit is not seen as an affront or an abridgment of the individual's rights. You belong to a society which says, from each according to his or her ability, and to each according to his or her needs. Give what you can and take what you need. That would also involve a re-evaluation of what we mean by words like need. I can imagine, you know, that some maniac in a cooperative society would want 4 television sets in each room. Either such a person has a clinical problem, which involves some kind of psychological care, understanding to sort of straighten out his or her mind. You know, what do you need 4 television sets in each room, or 3 cars, or more? Who knows? Or a fleet of cars. Obviously, society would then have to try to at least develop an educational system that focuses on what are basic and essential needs, and what are luxuries, what is necessary, and what is superfluous, and how much, in any case, of any of these needs have to be so fully satisfied that you live in maddening superfluity, drowned by all the commodities that are available to you because you are permitted to take what you need. I believe that eventually, and not over a very protracted period of time, people's views would begin to level out. The ancient Greeks, again, I'm not going back to them because they're exemplary as such, but they did have some remarkable traits, felt that a tremendous concern for material needs tended to swamp your mental faculties, your talents. You were preoccupied with what we today would call consumerism at the expense of your own spiritual and intellectual growth. So they tended, in fact, to strip down as much as possible their dependence on material needs, take what they really needed, so that they could devote more of their time and more of their energy, not to consuming, but to thinking, to reflecting, to arts, to other such, shall we say, socially, morally, and culturally elevating activities. This was true no less of the Greek aristocracy, which still lingered on from the past, than it was of the Greek so-called common person. Simplicity was seen as a virtue because it left room for political activity and intellectual and spiritual activity. I would like to think, in other words, that people will not simply become consumers because so much is available to them, but quite to the contrary, tend to reduce their consumption of superfluous and, in my opinion, very harmful materials like excessive food and even a leisure so sedentary that they essentially become potato couches. And I think most people will not want to become potatoes, whether on a couch or otherwise.
Seems that much consumerism is based on boredom.
True, that is true, but it's also based on anxiety.
The Chinese say that if you're going to walk 1,000 miles, you have to take the first step. Many people look at this anarcho-communist society, or even basic improvements in society, as the 1,000-mile walk. What would you suggest as the first step?
The very first step, in my opinion, is to organize a study group to explore all these ideas, to work them out, to make them coherent, and above all, not above all, but in large part, to finally make people wiser, if possible, by steeping them in the culture of the past as well as the culture of the present, or what is best in the culture of the past and the culture of the present. We live in in the so-called information age, we live in one of the most uninformed periods of history that I've encountered. There are people now who can't even locate, a very sizable number of young people who can't even locate the state in which they live on a map. Even a map that, without the name of the state, gives the outlines, the boundaries of the state. Nor can they tell you where Serbia is, or where Norway is, or Sweden is, or even where Germany and England is. So we have to certainly not only reconquer this knowledge which past generations had, but we have to go deeper into philosophy, into ethics, into history. We have to learn the lessons of the past as well as those of the recent present and of the present itself. And we also have to formulate our views with a view toward expressing them with a degree of coherence that people need so that they have some sense of direction. That done, I believe that they should then immerse themselves in their communities and start engaging in the kind of politics that I suggested. Now, I think that politics would take three phases. The first is that it would be structured around the minimum program of literally improving the quality of life as much as possible in their community. Then I would say that they have to move into a transitional program which throws them through an ever greater expansion of their demands as they gain more and more support and as they inform the public. Very important. As they themselves engage not only in self-education as a group, but in public education. Expand their demands until they reach the maximum demands that they have, namely those of basic social restructuring. Simultaneous with this activity of doing local work, they have to do interlocal work. That is to say, locality would link up with other localities where such groups exist, with still other localities until they form a broad network, regional and ultimately national, and hopefully even international. And at that particular point, when they become a major, hopefully, force in the societies in which they live, based on confederal decentralization. I do not mean isolated parochial decentralization, boxed into your own community with only a view limited to your own community, but rather an internationalist view, and minimally a regional view. I believe at that particular point, they have to contest the state power. They have to enlarge public power at the expense of the power currently being accrued to the nation state. And this may involve ultimately, and it's not anything that I will ever see, it may involve defiance toward the nation state, or it may involve adjudication in such a form that the nation state's power is radically diminished and hopefully disappears. At that point, one will have a network of interrelationships structured around local assemblies, confederated or unified through confederal councils, which have no policy-making decisions. Let me remind you of that. Based on majority votes, allowing for oppositions to develop, which will, in a way, play the role that is often imputed to competition, namely the contestation of ideas rather than the contestation that takes place in the marketplace over possessions. Possessions can now be administered as merely a practical matter. Supplying the needs of communities becomes a purely practical matter based on morality or ethics of from each according to his or her ability and to each according to his or her needs.